Once upon a time, there was a young boy who lived in a village. There was nothing exceptionally different about him, he was just an ordinary boy, not gifted with any special physical traits or intellectual abilities. Every day he set out on his own journey, and every day was a new adventure. He went to school where he was taught how to learn, he journeyed to the forest where he explored nature in solitude, he played pretend sword fighting with broken sticks with his childhood friends, and occasionally, he wrestled with bullies whenever there was unresolved conflict. As he walked home every day, he passed by many people, most notably a couple cute girls from school. They'd admire his bruises, and giggle as he looked at them. Pleased with the emotion he invoked, he'd look them in the eye, return a rather hesitant smile, and continue on his journey home. After each day's adventure, he would come home, eat, rest, and recover for the next day. And this repetitious cycle formed the part of the young boy's life commonly known as childhood. As always, life went on, the young boy continued to grow, gaining brawn, and boldness, as he lived a life of adventure and exploration. He gained specific knowledge in his chosen field of study as an apprentice blacksmith. He developed thick, corded muscles from hours of disciplined swordsmanship. And soon enough he began approaching the same girls, now much older and more confident, and holding small conversations with them. In fact, there was one girl he had a particular affinity with, he'd sit next to her in class, walk home with her, and share his troubles and worries with. She was more than just a friend, that much he knew, and he was happy with the relationship they had developed. Then one day, the most peculiar event occurred. When he returned home from the forge, he entered his room and in the corner noticed a magical black veil. He was instantly on high alert, all his years of fighting prepared him for such a moment. With instincts on edge, he approached the veil, shimmering in the corner of his room, and boldly asked, "What do you want?" The magic veil was silent for a moment, then a calm, collected voice spoke back saying, "I desire nothing, I exist only to show what it is that you desire." The young boy cautiously approached the veil. This inanimate object was the opposite of everything he stood for. He was accustomed to a world where you first put in the effort, then reap the rewards. A world where success only comes after hard work, and never the other way around. This magic veil was too good to be true. Eventually, his curiosity won him over, and he approached the veil, asking, like many adolescent boys naturally would, "Show me the prettiest woman in the world." And the magic veil did. The veil showed him exactly what he asked for, and left the young boy in a trance. This was surely the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, with curves in unimaginable places and the face of a goddess. He was mesmerized, staring at this woman for what seemed like hours, unable to believe his eyes. Nothing he had seen in real life could ever compare to what the veil had just presented to him. He was unpleasantly jarred back to reality by the voice of his mother, calling him down for dinner. He went down to eat, the beautiful woman wholly occupying his thoughts. He exploded through the next day's activities with no problem, motivated by the desire to get back to the magic veil. He hurriedly went home, quickly closed the door and, to his relief, noticed the veil waiting for him. It stood motionless and silent in the corner of his room, waiting for his command. He had been thinking about that woman all day long, and had been anticipating this very moment. He made the same request to the veil, but this time he wanted to see the woman in action, walking around, talking, simply existing as a human being would. His heart rate dramatically increased as the most beautiful woman in the world once again filled the veil, now in animate movement. His every neuron was firing, as he soaked up every detail of her as she completed common chores, from talking, to walking, to cooking. Nonetheless, nothing he had experienced could compare to this feeling, especially not the girls from school. He spent hours staring at her again doing menial tasks, until he was eventually called down for supper. The veil became an instrumental part of the young boy's life moving forward. In fact, he soon formed a new daily routine based upon the veil. He blocked off time every day so he could be alone with it. While his days fell under a similar routine, his requests of the veil began to change. He became uninterested in the first, beautiful woman, and began exploring new genres. He explored new women, new settings, and new situations. He saw things he had never known or dared to dream about. His requests grew more and more specific and graphic as he developed his own personal taste. Similarly, his life habits began to change moving forward. He spent more time in school distractedly thinking of the veil and brainstorming lists of new requests. He got sloppy with his swordsmanship as he began practicing less frequently and more distractedly. and as he hurried home to the veil, he was unable to bring himself to engage with the girls from school because they simply couldn't compare to the women he saw through the veil. They just weren't enough to satisfy his desires. He only maintained contact with the one girl he had always been close with, but in all honesty, he just didn't appreciate her the same. In his heart, he knew the only reason they were still together was because of her desire for him. A year after the veil had appeared, it had become the young boy's best friend. He got all the satisfaction he needed from it, it gave him whatever he wanted. And his requests started to get more and more deranged. He began making different requests to fulfill unknown fetishes of his in order to reach the same level of pleasure the first girl provided. But no matter what the veil showed him, it was never enough. It could never compare to that first time. He quit swordsmanship as he worked full-time in the forge to make money. He hadn't talked to the only girl in his life in over 3 months. After 15 years, when all his family members had since passed on or moved out, the boy remained in the home in which he grew up. He slept in the same room, with the veil in the same corner. Over the years, his relationship with the veil had changed yet again. He really had exhausted all his creativity with his requests. He genuinely didn't know what else could provide him the rush he once felt. He looked imploringly back at the magic veil, desperate for any hints, while it stared back expressionless. Finally, after 15 years of instant gratification, he felt empty inside, as he couldn't think of any request that could fill the hole in his heart. He asked the veil, "Show me what it is I truly desire." And the magical veil, as it always did, fulfilled his request. It conjured a visual, and the now old man curiously looked inside. He was shocked to see himself. He even looked of a similar age, but that's where the similarities ended. He was happy. In his arms he held tightly 2 healthy sons, both energetically trying to break free. He laughed as an elderly woman entered the scene, smiling warmly. With a start he realized it was the same girl he had spent his childhood with. The girl he once thought with whom he would live forever. The veil continued the visual, showing him picking up a wooden sword and gently sparring with his sons, taking them both on. He showed incredible grace and fluidity for an old man, weaving in and out of attacks from both his sons, while laughing and sneaking in a wink to his wife. "Stop, please stop." In real life, the old man watched the visual fade as his eyes burned and a tear slid down his cheek. He knew exactly what the veil had shown him. It was, after all, his request. And in that moment he looked up at the veil in remorse. He thought back to the words the veil had first spoken when it initially appeared in his room. "I exist only to show what it is that you desire." These words resonated in his mind as he realized, in all his time with the veil, this was the first time he had actually asked the veil to do what it initially claimed to. Every other time, he had obeyed his natural instinct, seeking out that which would provide the most pleasure. The man sat back down, feeling a general lack of emotion. No frustration, anger, or regret, just a raw sense of numbness. The man sat back down and just stared at the veil, incapable of feeling any emotion that his entire life had just slipped away in the blink of an eye.